Hi designers, it's Haley with Silver Moon Design School. In today's tutorial, I'm going to walk you through step by step how to create your very own deodorant mock-up that you can apply your own graphics to and have stunning mock-ups that impress your clients, your teachers, your friends, whoever you're trying to convey your packaging designs to. This tutorial is for you. So first, in part 1, I'll take you step by step. I'll show you how to create those 3D files in Adobe Illustrator. And in part 2, I'll show you how to put it all together, how to bring those shapes in, add your textures, add your graphics, and have a really stunning rendering. So let's get started. Alright, so let's kick it off in Adobe Illustrator. I have a new file here. It's got 2 layers. I have a reference layer and I have an art layer. The reference layer is where I've placed my reference images. I've put them here and I've locked that layer so that they don't move around because I'm going to be tracing over them to create these shapes. Alright, so I have 2 different angles because I wanted to see the inside as well as the outside so that if I wanted to create one option or one view with the lid off, I would have those pieces. But I liked this image on the top because it was so straight on and I know that I can trace it pretty well and get the desired result. Because I know I can trace it pretty easily from the front view, but then I also wanted to reference the top so that I know that it's not completely round, right? It's kind of an oval shape. I'm going to grab my oval tool, so just clicking on this oval over here, I'm going to drag to the outside edge of this bottle. And then as I come down to this example, I'm going to just kind of eyeball, based on the angle, what I think the deodorant depth is going to be, like if it was a direct overhead view. Now that I'm here, I'm going to change this to a lighter gray so I can get a better idea of what I'm working with. But I'm going to click on 3D and Materials. If you haven't opened this before, it's under Window and 3D and Materials, first one right at that top of that section. And then I'm going to click Extrude. Now you can see it's creating that cylinder. As I rotate to get a better view, you'll see the depth represented. So I'm going to work on that bottom section, but I'll copy it for the lid later. Just dragging until I get the height right about there. And so now if I rotate, that looks good for that piece. Now holding Option, click, I'm making the top piece, and I'm going to reduce the depth down to about 0.9 inches. Under Appearance, I can turn off 3D and Materials for a minute. In the Appearance panel, I can toggle the eyeball to turn off the 3D and Materials, and you can see that this is a hollow oval, right? But for the top, we need it to be solid. So what I do is just come to this color box, and I will just select the same gray that I have for the outline. And that will give us a solid shape when you go around like this. Then I'll also click on Bevel. I have the lid selected, I click Bevel, and if I rotate this around, it'll give you a better idea of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make this top section curve. So under the bevel options, I will go to Round and bring the width down, down, down. I'll bring the height down as well because it's just a very subtle curve. So I'm going to go with the width at 25 and the height also at 25, and we just want it to repeat one time. For these options, I won't really be seeing the inside of the lid, so I'm not showing that it's hollow. It is solid. So that is just one thing to consider when you're coming up with your composition, is that the lid will be solid and not hollow. All right, next we need to build this spinny wheel, this deodorant pusher-upper. So I'm going to grab my circle tool again, come to the center line, and draw a circle that's the width right there. Perfect. And you can see I still have the fill and a stroke outline applied to the shape. So we're going to keep rocking with it. I'm going to come to my stroke panel and click on dashed line. And it's probably easier if I pull it away from that shape so you can see it's creating ridges. So I want to adjust those so that they match the reference a little bit better. So I'm going to choose a dash of 2. Let's see if we hold it up here. I'll also choose a gap of 1 point, and that puts those together. Maybe I'll do 2 and 2 so the space looks equal. Yeah, I think that's, yeah, I'm happy with that. And so now I'll come back to extrude, click on that. Again, I can come down, rotate it so that it is the correct height, and bring down the depth until it matches the reference. Now that I have this shape here, I'm actually going to change this to a 1 point and a 1 point dashed line, because I think that's just going to give us, yeah, now that I see the shadows, a 1 point dash and a 1 point gap is the right way to go for this spinny wheel. So putting that to the side, it's time to create the inside pieces. So this is actually a good time to point out that there is another layer here that goes underneath the lid that we'll need to create. I'm going to copy this cylinder shape, realizing that I need to bring it in, what is that, maybe 1/4 of an inch. So I will just shrink this down manually. And then next I'll bring down the depth so that it sits at the height. And I can even drag it down here. I know the angle's a little strange, but I think we can work with it. And then creating this dashed line, we're going to follow a very similar process to this spinny pusher-upper. I don't know the technical word for that. So the depth I'm going to choose, I make a copy of that circle that we just had. I'm going to choose a depth of 0.02, so it's really, really thin. The dashed line, click that button again, and this time we're going to choose like 20 points because these strips are pretty big. They're the grippy part that holds the lid in place. So we're going to go with a 5-point gap. Let's see what a 50-point dash looks like. I think it's got to be even more, like 80 points. I'm going to go with 65 points and maybe a 15-point gap. Okay, this looks good to me. I went with a 65-point dash and a 15-point gap. I don't know that I'll be able to line it up exactly, but we can get it somewhat close. So it'll at least give the illusion of that function being there, which is what we want. Last but not least, we have the actual deodorant material itself. So I'm going to go back to that last piece we created, this plastic insert piece, and I'm going to drag a copy down here. I don't need it to be outlined, I do need it to be solid, so I'm going to flip that fill, going to add a round bevel, and if I rotate this around, this will give me a better idea of what I'm working with. So height and width. So width I'm going to bring up to 100%, the depth I'm going to bring down, and then the height I'm going to choose 33. I like the number 3. And it's not going to match the curve exactly, just the nature of what this is, but I can bring down the depth and so that it sits a little more flush and looks pretty close. But that will give us that texture, and we'll add that when we get there. If you wanted to add this detail on the lid, that would be pretty easy to do. So I can come and create a little tiny circle right here. All right, and drag it to the side. This will just add that little extra detail that makes it look somewhat more realistic. So I'll choose inflate for this and choose, let's see how deep it is. I'm going to adjust the depth to 0.01 inches. All right, so with the depth at 0.01 inches, that gives us that little insert, and then there is just a tiny little dot in the center. So I'll flip to a fill and bring in that tiny, tiny little dot. And I can center these together to create one grouped shape that I'll export together. Now I need to export these in a 3D file that will work inside of Adobe Dimension. So I'm going to select all of these pieces that I made, and I'm going to right click, go down to collect for export, and click as multiple assets. There you can see it dumps all of it together, even that little one. So if you have objects in the future and you group them together, this is a good way to know that you don't have to place every little single piece and part, but you can still make them together in Illustrator and save a little bit of time. And then I just go through and name things so that I'm very technical. Spinny wheel. This is the lid gripper, deodorant, tube inset. So once you have all of your files labeled, something that makes sense to you. Come down to this drop down and you're going to want to choose this OBJ file. This is a universal 3D image file type, and this is what we want. So make sure all of these are highlighted in the asset export panel and then click export at the bottom. Alright designers, that wraps up part 1. Join me in part 2 where we'll take these 3D files we just made and import them into Adobe Dimension. I'll see you there.